Over the last couple of weeks, you have heard about some significant downgrades. There's obviously the U.S. debt downgrade by Fitch. I actually think the more consequential and the ones that you and I should be paying attention to is the one that Moody's did for the banks. We're going to talk about this with the one and only Taylor from Life Goal Investments. Man, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I think that this is something that you and I basically have been calling for. Now we weren't calling for it in the form of, hey, rating agency, you need a downgrade thing, but we are calling for it in the fact that, like, hey, we need to stop turning a blind eye to what happened to our banking system, and it's a function of the interest rates going higher, and we might see higher interest rates yet to come out of the Federal Reserve. What is the underlying fundamental cause or result on banks is the real question. And Moody's came in and said, like, guys, all right, we've downgraded 10 of them now. They downgraded
Yeah.
10 regional banks.
What I would tell my audience is this is just the start. I mean, and the other thing to talk about is I think it's a joke, the biggest banks, the big six or the big 10 or wherever you kind of draw that line. It's not going to be about them. They're rock solid. There's nothing going on there. But the other 4,000, 4,500 banks, they're all in trouble. I mean, Taylor, if we just tick off how a bank works, let's just go through this. So people may not realize what is a bank, right? A bank is an institution that takes deposits and then via fractional reserve lending lends them out. They are told to hold assets so that they have these on the books and all of these things. So most banks were told to buy treasuries. Most banks are full up of treasuries. One of the assets that has taken the greatest hit as you've gone from 0 to 5.25 Fed funds, treasuries. That's not good. I mean, that's just step one. I've got more, but I mean, there are banks, in my opinion, that are insolvent if they were forced to mark to market. I mean, lots of them.
Yep. Yeah, and we just got new regulation that's coming down the pike and will be enacted very soon now, that regional banks, which big banks have already been forced to report this, now have to report unrealized losses, which is
Well,
exactly what you're referencing there. The treasuries that are sitting on their balance sheet that were marked at par at $1,000 now
yeah.
actually have to be marked at 850 or wherever they are. And
670 or something.
yeah, and that's the
Ah,
problem where people are going to look at this and say, hey, if we all go and ask for our money at the same time, they're not going to have it. And that's a scare tactic that is unleashed via social media, which hammered Silicon Valley Bank. And then
yeah.
now
In a
everyone,
day and a half.
banks,
In a day and a
they
half.
bank right here and they can go on
Yeah.
and say, hey, I'm moving my money today. And that's why a run on the bank can be so more systematic and swift than it ever has in the past.
So that's just step one. Step two, banks are competing for deposits because they have to shore all of this stuff up. So how do you do that? You pay a higher interest.
Yep.
So again, the big six, the big 10, they're still paying nothing, sub 0.5%.
Correct.
But now I think I read somewhere that PNC is paying 5% on savings. I could be wrong,
Yeah.
but go look it up. But this whole margin that they used to make, it ain't there. So again, their expense line is going up, up, and up.
100%. And what you're doing is just seeing that profit margin get chewed away at, because again, net
Exactly.
interest margin is the difference between what they pay depositors and what they're able to gain on loans that they pay out on the back end. And that is razor thin right now for regional and small banks, but it's still really, really wide for that of large banks. And what'll be interesting to see is, do we get people having more fear out of regional banks and saying, hey, I'm willing to forego the 5% this regional bank is willing to pay me on interest because I'm scared about the actual legitimacy of that bank, and I'm going to move it over to these big banks paying zero? Or does that not happen and people can, maintain their assets at the regional bank, and then potentially the big banks look at each other and say, hey, I'm going to move a little. And then maybe if one moves a little, they all move a little. And maybe you see that compression between what being saved on or being paid on savings accounts between large banks and regional banks come together. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
So next, not only did these commercial and regional banks do a lot of, buying treasuries, but a lot of the lending that they have done over the
Yeah.
years was to small and medium businesses, to builders, commercial real estate. And that's not a great place to be right now. So the loan loss reserves are going up. They're being forced to, not refi stuff. I mean, there's just their whole business model of being in the community is up in the air and not in a good spot today. I mean, that's another
Yeah, and
domino falling.
what you see in the small, businesses, and then, specifically commercial real estate, what you see playing out there is what people anticipated seeing play out in the private real estate market, where they thought higher interest rates would crater housing prices. Now that didn't play out because there's, such a supply demand imbalance there, but it has started to play out at least to an extent on commercial real estate, because there's a difference in how mortgages are issued between commercial real estate and residential private real estate. Private real estate, you and I going out and buying a mortgage, is all fixed rate stuff for the most part. But commercial real estate on the other side has that adjustable rate mortgage every 2 years, every 5 years, depending on what the contract is that you sign with that bank. So as interest rates go higher, it doesn't affect you and I and our mortgage on our primary home. But if we own other things commercially, that certainly affects our cash flow that we see there, because we're now paying the bank more. And what if you own an office building as your commercial real estate, and all of a sudden the hybrid work from home has them only taking 70% of the space that they took before? So your income is down, but your expenses are up as interest rates went higher, and the bank's saying, hey, your mortgage rate went up along the way.
Yeah. And then the final nail in the coffin for these banks, and why I think we're going to see a lot more downgrades, is one of the ways out of this is to lend more. There's just no appetite. There's no appetite to lend, right?
Right.
So their whole so expenses up, balance sheet down, loan loss reserves up, and there's no revenue coming in. That's a
Yeah,
disaster coming.
and so not only do they have less demand for loans, as people just don't want to take out a loan for a car at 8% or whatever it is, they'll just say, hey, I'll hang on to the one I have, and hopefully at someday these numbers change. But the other thing is they're also increasing the requirements. So the requirements that people have to qualify for these loans are going up. So it's not just the demand side. They're saying also, I'm not willing to loan just anybody money at this point. And if your profit center, which is lending, is getting shut down, banks are in the business of lending out money to make money. If that's not
Mhm.
there, and then all of a sudden some of your input costs are going up based on having to pay people out more for deposits, it's a really tough equation. And I think what you're going to see is, yes, I think if they're doing real work right now, the rating agencies, I think you're going to see more downgrades.
You have
I
to.
don't
You
know
have
that
to.
we get a bunch of failures out of banks, and I said this in the past on your show. I think what we get is a lot of aligned mergers. So the government stepping in and
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah.
come together, guys.
No, they're and I think this is a 6 to 10 quarter rolling process. This won't be
Yeah, it is.
fast. This won't be a week, month, quarter. It'll be years. But I think the outcome is forced marriages. Kind of what happened. I think it was Bank of California and Pac West.
Correct.
Uh,
Yep, that's right.
that
Those
was
are the right names.
basically a shotgun marriage of like, go, right? You don't have a choice.
And, and what's interesting there is, beneath the surface, JP Morgan comes in and takes $2 billion of their good debt
At a
and pulls it
discount.
out, their good loans, and pulls it out and says, we'll take them.
Yeah, you need some cash to make this deal work. I got a little bit of cash over here because I'm yeah.
Golly.
Oh,
Yeah. And
J.P.
so
Morgan.
I mean, they're everywhere. They're everywhere. And it's surprising to me, either he's just a better businessman and has better connections with the government, or maybe I don't know. I guess my question is, why is JP Morgan involved in all of these mergers and other companies, whether it be a Citi or a Goldman or whatever? They don't seem to have that level of involvement. I'm wondering what the difference is there.
Well, it's funny if you really want to talk about that. I think Goldman was the answer for at least going through the Great Recession.
Right?
I think Goldman. I think Solomon is the guy. I think he tried to go small bank and kind of harness the brand, in my opinion. Um, he's now retreated from that, obviously, but at this point, it's tarnished. So I think J.P. Morgan kind of raised up to the creme de la creme. That's just one guy's opinion. Thinking about it for 10 seconds.
Yeah, yeah. I hadn't put any thought into it either, but it is interesting that JP Morgan seems to be the savior on all of these fronts.
Yeah.
For savior, call it what you want.
At the end of the day, there will be, or I should say, there should be more bank downgrades. I think it could go all the way up to the super regionals, the Big Ten or Big Six or whatever it is. They won't be touched. They're fine, right? Their net interest margin record high, right,
Yep.
and growing.
Yep.
So again,
And the
it's
other
not
thing that
those.
people have to realize too is that they also faced, since the great financial crisis that played out in 2008, 2009, the big banks had higher regulations placed upon them.
Yeah,
So
they're already
they were
adopted to the new rules.
correct. And the regionals didn't have that. And then obviously some cracks are forming where those regulations, helped out the big banks. And now you're starting to see it play out not so well on the regional side.
Well, that's another point. I actually forgot that one. I wrote it down and we talked about it yesterday on my channel, but they're having increased regulation, which AKA is cost, right?
Correct.
Regulation ain't free. So again, their
Correct.
whole income statement is wrong. Expenses up, revenue down. Their balance sheets are terrible. Loan loss reserves, they can't grow out. The only answer is how long can they hold on before they're forced to merge with someone else?
And
It's
they
bad.
got some bigger. So Moody's downgraded 10 banks, regionals,
10.
but
Yep.
they also put on negative watch 11
Yeah.
additional. And some of those are big ones, like
Big
Capital
ones.
One is massive.
Yeah.
M&T, now I'm in New York and it's based out of New York, but M&T is a massive bank on the
It is. I
entire
hadn't
East
heard. I don't
Coast.
know. I don't know M&T. Okay.
Yeah, they're based out of Buffalo, New York, but they're about as big of a regional as there is.
Okay.
And so that's a really big one that also got downgraded. So it's more widespread than just 10.
Yeah. That's what I wanted people to realize. I think Moody's did this on purpose. Let's go shoot at the little guys. Let's tell them it's coming bigger, because I think if they came out and downgraded 100 or 200, which they probably should have, it would have freaked people out.
It's interesting that it took them so long. I wonder if they just give time, like the Federal Reserve calls them, Jerome calls them and goes, guys, don't do this
Man,
now, please. I
I
got
need
some
some
Band-Aids,
time.
some gum. I'm going to stick on some of these wounds. Let me get these wounds out of the way. And then if you have to do it, I get it.
Yeah, I think something like that. Well, do me a favor, Taylor. You put a lot of amazing stuff. Where can people find you?
Yeah, find us at Life Goal Investments. We're on both Instagram and on TikTok.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate you. Have a great week.
Yeah, thanks, Michael.